Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at an article about intimacy and self-respect in the modern dating world. The article really makes a case for why we should all face, men and women, value our bodies,
Yeah.
and be a lot more selective about when we become physically intimate, especially before marriage.
Yeah.
It's a really thought-provoking piece. And our mission today is to kind of go through and dissect some of the main arguments and see what kind of gems we can find that will help all of us navigate relationships today.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating article because it's not just promoting abstinence. It's more about how do we become more intentional about the choices that we're making in our relationships. And I think that's something that, especially in today's world of instant gratification, it's a really refreshing perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I really appreciate about this article is it doesn't shy away from the emotional side of things.
Hmm.
It even brings up how intimacy, even in casual relationships, can really mess with our emotions because of those bonding hormones.
Right. It's not just all in our heads. There's like actual science behind it. When we become intimate with someone, our brains release these hormones called oxytocin and vasopressin. And these are powerful chemicals that create these feelings of attachment and closeness. And that's part of the reason why even a short-term relationship can leave us feeling heartbroken or confused when it ends.
Absolutely. It was like you get caught up in this whirlwind of emotions, and all of a sudden, you're more attached than you ever intended to be.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where, the intensity of your emotions just kind of caught you off guard, where things move faster than you expected, and then you were kind of left feeling lost when it ended?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that's a pretty common experience. And it kind of highlights the point the article is making about, like, let's slow down and, build that solid foundation for a relationship. Before we jump into physical intimacy.
Right. And speaking of taking things slow, the article also delves into the physical stakes that are involved with intimacy. And it's not just about avoiding STIs, although that's obviously a crucial thing to keep in mind. Even with protection, no method is 100% foolproof.
Yeah.
So being informed and making conscious choices is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, the article doesn't go into a ton of detail about, specific STI risks, but it does stress how important it is to have open communication about sexual history and health in any relationship. And I think, these conversations can be really tough, especially in those beginning stages. But they're so vital for protecting both yourself and your partner.
For sure. I mean, it's about being responsible and having respect for yourself and your partner and prioritizing that open communication. So
Yeah.
Think about your own relationships. How do you approach those conversations? How do you bring up those sometimes difficult topics?
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that, the article goes beyond just those physical aspects of intimacy. It emphasizes the importance of self-respect and how setting standards for intimacy can actually strengthen your sense of self-worth.
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. It's not just about avoiding negative consequences. It's about recognizing your own value
Yeah.
and making choices that reflect that. It's about owning your decisions and not feeling pressured to do anything. That doesn't align with your personal values.
Exactly. And, the article talks about how this ties into this bigger picture of, having agency in your relationships. It's about being in the driver's seat, making those conscious choices, about intimacy, and not letting yourself get swept away by passion or pressure.
And I think that sense of agency leads perfectly into the next point that the article raises, which is the importance of clarity in relationships. It argues that sometimes delaying physical intimacy can actually provide more clarity about who your partner is and whether you're truly compatible.
That's so fascinating because it's so easy to get caught up in that initial excitement of a new relationship. But the article's suggesting that sometimes that physical chemistry can mask, underlying incompatibilities in really crucial areas like values or goals or even just basic respect.
Right. You think about a time when you felt a strong initial spark with someone, but as you got to know them better, you realize you weren't actually a good fit at all. And the article argues that slowing things down and building a deeper connection before diving into the physical intimacy can help you avoid those types of situations.
Yeah, it's like building a house. You wouldn't start with the roof. You need that strong foundation first.
Exactly. And that's where Intimacy 2.0 comes in. The article talks about how intimacy is about so much more than just the physical act. It's about emotional vulnerability, shared experiences, intellectual stimulation, and even spiritual alignment.
It's so funny because some people think of intimacy as like a simple on-off switch. And this Intimacy 2.0 concept really reframes that. It's like, hey, there's this whole spectrum of ways to connect with someone on a deeper level. And physical intimacy is just one part of that equation.
It's about going beyond the surface level
Yeah.
and really getting to know someone. So think about your own relationships. How do you define intimacy? What does a truly fulfilling connection look and feel like to you?
Yeah, that's something for all of us to ponder. I mean, this article really pushes us to think about, what are we seeking in our relationships?
For sure. And it goes on to make the case that building that strong foundation of emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual connection
Yeah.
can make the physical aspect of intimacy even more meaningful.
It's like nuts. Taking the time to learn all the intricacies of a musical instrument. You can play a simple tune right away, but once you understand the nuances and complexities, the music becomes a much richer and profound.
Yeah. I like that analogy. It really speaks to the power of taking the time to nurture those different aspects of intimacy. And here's where I think the article challenges a common misconception. It's not just about advocating for abstinence before marriage. While the article does kind of come from that perspective, the arguments that it presents really apply to anyone who wants to. Make conscious and deliberate choices about intimacy, regardless of their beliefs.
Exactly. It's about taking ownership of
Yeah.
your choices and not letting societal pressures or expectations dictate what you do in your relationships.
Right.
Our culture often pushes us towards these casual relationships and instant gratification, even when that might not be what we truly want.
Yeah.
It's like there's this unspoken pressure to rack up experiences
Yeah.
as if that's the measure of success in the dating world.
All right, it's like there's a checklist.
Yeah.
You got to date a certain number of people. You got to have certain experiences. And then you're supposed to feel accomplished if you check all the boxes. But this article is about flipping the script and saying, wait a minute, what if we define success on our own terms? What if we prioritize what truly aligns with our values and our goals, even if it means going against the grain? And there's a real sense of empowerment that comes with that. It's about reclaiming your agency and deciding what feels right for you instead of just going with the flow.
Right.
And the article even argues that taking this approach can actually strengthen, your willpower and your discipline, which are valuable traits in all areas of life, not just relationships.
That's a really good point. It's like you're building mental muscles by learning to resist impulses and make intentional choices. And that self-control can have a ripple effect on, everything from your career to your personal growth. Absolutely. And it's not just about individual benefits either. The article suggests that when both partners are on the same page about being selective and intentional with intimacy, it can actually foster a deeper level of mutual respect within the relationship.
It's like you're saying to each other, I see you, I value you, and I respect your boundaries and your choices. And that level of understanding and consideration can lay a really strong foundation for trust and connection.
Exactly. That mutual respect becomes the bedrock of the relationship and allows you to build something stronger and more sustainable.
Yeah.
And, the article also dives into a point that I think is particularly relevant in today's dating landscape, which is, the potential pitfalls of rushing into physical intimacy.
That's a big one. It's so easy to get swept up in the moment and let physical attraction take center stage. But the article cautions against letting that overshadow everything else. It argues that those intense early feelings can sometimes mask deeper issues, like misaligned values, conflicting life goals, or even just fundamental differences in how you approach relationships.
And those are things that you can only uncover by taking the time to truly get to know someone beyond just that surface level.
Exactly. And that's where the article's emphasis on building emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual connection becomes so important. It's about moving beyond that initial spark and really understanding who the other person is at their core.
It's about discovering whether you share common ground.
Yeah.
Whether you can laugh together, whether you can have those deep, meaningful conversations that really solidify a bond.
Yeah.
And the article argues that those are the things that ultimately determine whether a relationship can stand the test of time.
It's about building a connection that goes beyond just the physical. And this brings us to an interesting part of the article, where it delves into the connection between intimacy and spiritual fulfillment. For many people, their faith or their spiritual beliefs play a significant role in how they view and approach intimacy.
Absolutely. For some, abstaining from premarital sex is a way of, honoring their spiritual principles and staying true to their beliefs.
Right.
And the article acknowledges that this can be a deeply personal and meaningful decision, and it can actually bring a sense of purpose and direction to their relationships.
And even for those who don't come from a specific religious background, I think there's something to be said for treating intimacy as something sacred, something to be cherished and shared, with someone who holds a special place in your life.
It's about recognizing the profound power of intimacy and approaching it with intentionality and reverence, rather than just seeing it as a casual act.
So what does this all mean for us? I think the article's core message is about taking ownership of our choices.
Yeah.
When it comes to intimacy, it's about making conscious decisions that prioritize self-respect, emotional well-being, and the potential for building truly meaningful relationships.
It's about shifting away from that culture of instant gratification and moving towards a mindset that values patience, intentionality, and those deeper aspects of intimacy that truly nourish a connection.
And it's about having the courage to define what success looks like in your relationships on your own terms, even if it means challenging societal norms or expectations. That's a powerful message. And I think it really resonates with a lot of people who are navigating the complexities of dating in today's world.
Absolutely. You know, the article doesn't provide all the answers, but it definitely offers a fresh perspective and some valuable food for thought.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question, inspired by the article. In a world that constantly tells us to want more faster now, how can we reclaim the power of patience and intentionality in our relationships? How can we create space for genuine connection and build relationships that are truly built to last? That's the question, isn't it? How do we cultivate patience and intentionality in a world that's constantly pushing for speed and instant gratification? The article hints at a few ideas. And I think one key lies in shifting our perspective on what relationships are truly about.
Yeah, it's like we've fallen into this trap of viewing relationships as like just another item on our to-do list. Get the degree, land the job, find the partner, get married, have kids. It's all about hitting these milestones. But that mindset misses the whole point.
It does. It reduces relationships to a series of accomplishments instead of seeing them as opportunities for growth, connection, and shared experiences. It's no wonder so many people feel disillusioned or unfulfilled when they approach relationships with that kind of checklist mentality.
Right, and the article is kind of challenging that by reminding us of the beauty of slowness. You know, it's about savoring the process of getting to know someone, allowing trust to build organically, and letting intimacy unfold at its own pace.
Like a fine wine that gets better with age, or a delicious meal that takes hours to prepare. You know, the anticipation, the careful attention to detail, the slow simmering of flavors, it all adds to the richness of the experience.
Exactly. We live in a culture of, instant downloads and fast food. But some of the most rewarding things in life, like meaningful relationships, take time and nurturing to truly blossom.
So how do we apply that slow food approach to our relationships in this age of, swiping and instant messaging? How do we carve out space for intentionality in a world that's all about speed and efficiency?
I think it starts with being really honest with ourselves about our intentions. Why are we dating in the first place? What are we truly seeking?
Are we just looking for a quick hookup or a distraction? Or are we genuinely yearning for a deep and meaningful connection? Being clear about our motivations from the outset can make all the difference.
It's about aligning our actions with our desires. And it also involves, setting boundaries and communicating those boundaries clearly to potential partners.
It's about having those sometimes uncomfortable conversations early on and saying, this is what I'm comfortable with, this is what I value, and this is the kind of relationship I'm looking for.
It's about respecting yourself enough to articulate your needs and your expectations. And yes, it might mean walking away from situations that don't align with your values or goals, even if it feels like you're missing out on something.
That takes courage to say no to something that might be tempting in the moment, but ultimately doesn't serve your long-term vision.
But that's where the real power lies. In choosing your path, even if it's less traveled. And the article doesn't shy away from the fact that this approach requires effort and intentionality. It's not always easy to swim against the tide of societal expectations, but it's ultimately about reclaiming control of your own journey.
It's about choosing to live and love on your own terms. So as we wrap up this deep dive into intimacy and self-respect, I want to encourage you to reflect on what resonated with you today. How can you apply these insights to your own life and relationships?
How can you embrace the power of patience and intentionality in your own quest for love and connection? Remember, it's about making conscious choices, setting clear boundaries, and honoring your own unique path.
It's about recognizing that true intimacy is a journey, not a destination. And it's a journey worth taking. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those deeper connections.